In this video, we're going to go over the most missed questions from the Unit 1 quiz. There were really just a few ones that people missed. Overall, we did really, really well. So I don't want you to think that because I'm making a video, everyone did terribly, because that's just not the case. I can't even think of one person who did really, really bad. But I want to show you the most common mistakes that people made, because they're small mistakes, very easy to fix. Now, as I go through this, you may see some of the questions you had, but you'll definitely see some of the questions that you did not have, because there are many different versions with many different numbers. So it's still useful for you to look at and use these problems for extra practice if you would like. Okay, in this first one, it says convert 9.82 times 10 to the 8th dg to capital MG. Show your work. So just because I give you something in scientific notation, don't think that that's anything different than what we're doing. A lot of people said dg was decagrams, but dg is actually decigrams. So what we want to do is recognize this is prefix to prefix, so we'll go from decigrams to grams, put a 1 with dg because it has a prefix, and then deci is 10 to the minus 1. Then we'll go from grams to megagrams. 1 megagram is 10 to the 6 grams. What I'm going to plug into my calculator is 9.82 times 10 to the 8th, 10 to the minus 1, divided by 10 to the 6th. If you're going to plug in your ones, you could also do 9.82 times 10 to the 8th, times 10 to the minus 1, times 1 divided by 1, oops, not 10, but 1, and then a second division divided by 10 to the 6th. So let me plug that in. 9.82 times 10 to the 8th divided, or times 10 to the negative 1 divided by 10 to the 6th. And we're going to get 9.82 times 10 to the 1st megagrams, or 98.2 megagrams. Okay, so keeping this rolling here, convert 0.00804 centiliters to nanoliters. So very similar in how I'm going to set this up. I'm just going to go 0.00804 centiliters. We'll go from centiliters to liters, because this is a prefix to prefix, and liters to nanoliters. 10 to the minus 2 is for centi, and then 10 to the negative 9 is for nano. And we get 80,400, or 8.04 times 10 to the 4th nanoliters. On this one, notice this is, we're going to convert 200 feet to millimeters, and because we have some non-metric units here, I have to give you those conversion factors. So there's lots of ways that you can do this even without these conversion factors that I gave you, but you can solve it, and I'm going to solve it using these conversion factors. So we want to go from feet to millimeters. So the first thing I need to do is try to find a way to get into the metric system, and I'm going to say that there's 1 foot for every 12 inches. And then 1 inch is 2.54 centimeters. And then we'll go from centimeters to meters, and then meters to millimeters. And you may be wondering, is there another way to do this? And there is. So 200 times 12 times 2.54 times 10 to the negative 2 times 1 divided by 1 divided by 1 divided by 1 divided by 10 to the negative 3rd. Here I get 6.096 times 10 to the 4th. As far as sig figs are concerned, this would just be 6 times 10 to the 4th, because 200 only has 1 sig fig. Now another way you could do this, say 200 feet, there's 5,280 feet for every 1 mile, and then 1 mile is 1.61 kilometers. Then you could say kilometers to meters, meters to millimeters. So both are really great, and both will give you the same exact answer. Now, what I saw in the quiz is some people did it this second way, and they said, oh, those cancel. And they don't cancel because one is 10 to the third and one is 10 to the minus third, and if you just plug that into your calculator, they're not going to cancel because they're not the same thing. Okay, on this one, we have 1,000 centigrams. We'll go from centigrams to grams, and that's all that they ask for. So 1 centigram is 10 to the minus second grams. So 1,000 times 10 to the minus 2. We get 10 grams, or 1 times 10 to the first grams. On here we have 5,487 microliters. We're going to go to gigaliters, so we'll go from micro to liters, and then from liters to gigaliters. Giga, a lot of people said is 12, and giga is actually going to be in billions, so that's 9 actually. So we have 5,487 times 10 to the negative 6 times 1 divided by 1 divided by 10 to the 9th. And we get 5.487 times 10 to the minus 12 gigaliters. And that makes sense to me. A gigaliter is huge, a microliter is very small, so we're not going to get very many gigaliters. Okay, last one on metric conversions. Here we're given 1,000 decimeters, and we're going to go to nanometers. And so notice that, we had decimeters to megameter, or megagrams earlier. So decimeters, we'll go from decimeters to meters, and then meters to nanometers. Decis 10 to the minus 1, nanos 10 to the minus 9. This guy has 4 sig figs, so I know in my final answer I should end up with 4. And I'm going to get 1.000 times 10 to the 11 nanometers. Okay, let me go through some density questions. We did really well on density, but there's one hiccup that I keep seeing for a lot of people. So let's try to get that squared away. That way we don't keep making that mistake. Okay, so in this one it says find the density in grams per milliliter. So we know density equals mass over volume, and what a lot of people do is they just say, oh, 2.75 is the mass and the volume is 250 milliliters. And that is not terrible to do, but it's not going to be right. Because they say in grams per milliliter, we need to have grams over 250 milliliters. So just off to the side, you'll take 2.75 kilograms. We'll just go from kilograms to grams. 1 kilogram is 10 to the third gram, so we're going to get 2,750. Now we plug that in. As far as sig figs, we have 3, then we have 4, so we'll need 3 in our final answer. So 2,750 divided by 250, and you get 11, but it should really be 11.0 grams per milliliter. Okay, in this next one it says the density of a copper cube is 8.92 grams per milliliter. If the cube has a volume of 57 milliliters, what is the mass of the cube in grams? So we're just going to create a ratio or proportion. Grams for every 1 milliliter equals X grams. And this 57, I've got to ask myself if it's good enough to plug in. It is in the units of the correct volume. For density, they're both milliliters, so we can plug that in. We're going to cross multiply. I'm going to get X equals 8.92 times 57. And when I plug that in, I get X equals 508.44 grams. But with sig figs, this guy has 2, this guy has 3, and so we'll want 2. So this should be 510 grams. Okay, this one a lot of people goofed on, but it was a small goof here. So a student transfers 5 milliliters of ethanol into a flask that has a mass of 15.25 grams. The student finds that the mass of the flask plus ethanol is 19.17 grams. What is the density? So density, we know, is mass divided by volume. And when we take mass over volume, we've just got to make sure we get the correct mass. The volume is clearly 5.00 milliliters, but what I had a lot of people do is plug in 19.17 grams. The problem with 19.17 as the mass is that includes the flask. So what we're going to do, just off to the side, we'll take 19.17 grams. This is flask and ethanol. And we'll just subtract the 15.25 grams, which is just the flask. 19.17 minus 15.25, and we're going to get 3.92 grams. Okay, so 3.92 divided by 5, we're going to get 0.784 grams per milliliter. Sig figs, though, we got to consider, this guy has 3, this one also has 3, so this is a really good answer because it also has 3. Okay, just a few more questions and then we'll call it quits on this video, but I want to make sure I go through all of the different types of questions. Here we are given 32.5 grams, 15.0 milliliters. We'll just divide the two. Not a terrible question. 3 sig figs divided by 3 sig figs. We should report our answer with 3 sig figs. So I get 2.17 grams per milliliter. Okay, let's pay attention to this one because this one a lot of people did just fine, but one hiccup again. We want to know the mass of ethanol. So our density is 0.789 grams for every 1 milliliter. This is grams over milliliters, so we're going to solve for grams because it says what's the mass. We cannot plug in 0.2. That would be incorrect because that's in liters. We need milliliters. So what we'll do is just off to the side, we'll take 0.2 liters. We'll go from liters to milliliters. And when I math this out, I get 200 milliliters. I'm going to cross multiply now, so I get x equals 0.789 times 200. The sig figs on this one is a little bit weird. X equals 157.8 grams. With sig figs, we get 3 and then 1 sig fig, so this is actually going to be 100 and actually 200 grams. Okay, I wanted to say 160, but 160 has 2 sig figs, so we had to just have 1, so we had to round it all the way up to 200. Okay, last two. A rectangular block of copper has a mass of 1896 grams. The dimensions of the block are 8.2 centimeters by 5.5 centimeters by 3.2 centimeters. What is the density? So density, we know, is mass over volume. Oops. So how I did this one is I just took 1896 grams and I divided by the volume. You can do the volume in a separate step if you want, but this is 8.2 centimeters times 5.5 centimeters times 3.2 centimeters. So when I plug this into my calculator, 1896 grams divided by 8.2 divided by 5.5 divided by 3.2. And when I do that, I get 13.137 grams per cubic centimeter. Remember, cubic centimeter is the same thing as a milliliter. They're actually the same thing. So it's okay to say centimeters cubed. We need, let's do our sig figs. We have 4 sig figs, 2, 2, and 2. So we are going to cut this off to 2 sig figs, so 13 grams per cubic centimeter. Okay, last one. It says, what volume of silver metal will mass exactly 2.5 kilograms? The density of silver is 10.5 grams per 1 cubic centimeter. So we'll set up our proportion. We need grams and cubic centimeters. Hopefully at this point in the video you say kilograms is not going to work for us. So we'll go from kilograms to grams. 1 kilogram is 10 to the 3rd grams. We'll plug in 2,500. Then x centimeters cubed. We will cross multiply. We get 2,500 equals 10.5x. We'll divide by 10.5. X equals 2500 divided by 10.5. We get 238, and we could keep going, but I know we don't need to for sig figs. We have 3 sig figs, and then we have 2 sig figs, so this is actually going to be 240 centimeters cubed as our final answer.